I've always believed that blood isn't thicker than water when it comes to workplace politics. But I never imagined my own sister-in-law would prove that theory so devastatingly. Some people say family and business don't mix, and after what Amanda Walsh did to me at Riverside Home Solutions, I can tell you they're absolutely right. What started as a simple favor for my husband's struggling sister turned into the most calculated betrayal I've ever experienced. And by the time I figured out her game, she'd nearly destroyed everything I'd worked 5 years to build. You see, when someone systematically frames you for every customer complaint that walks through the door, when they manipulate reports to make you look incompetent, and when they convince your own CEO that you're the reason customers are fleeing in droves, you learn something important about human nature. You learn that some people will smile at your dinner table on Sunday and stab you in the back on Monday morning. But more importantly, you learn that underestimating a marketing coordinator with a journalism degree and a very particular set of analytical skills is the biggest mistake they'll ever make. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Chen, and 3 months ago I thought I had everything figured out. I was the senior marketing coordinator at Riverside Home Solutions, a mid-sized home improvement retailer here in Portland, Oregon. After 5 years of climbing the ladder from junior marketing assistant to running our entire digital campaign strategy, I'd finally earned the respect of our CEO Robert Hayes and carved out my own little kingdom in the marketing department. My campaigns were driving a 30% increase in foot traffic. Our online engagement was through the roof, and I was being considered for the newly created marketing director position that everyone knew was coming. My husband Michael and I had just bought our first house in Beaverton, a cute craftsman with the kind of original hardwood floors that make you feel like you're living in a Pinterest board. Life was good. Michael worked as a software engineer for a tech startup downtown, and between our two incomes we were finally feeling financially stable. We'd even started talking about taking that trip to Japan we'd been planning since college. Then Amanda happened. Michael's younger sister had always been what you might diplomatically call a free spirit. At 28, she'd bounced between jobs like a pinball, never staying anywhere longer than 18 months. According to Michael, she had a talent for finding fault with every boss, every company culture, every workplace policy. There was always someone else to blame when things went south. When she called Michael in tears last February, claiming her latest customer service job had laid her off for no reason, my husband's protective big brother instincts kicked into overdrive. That's when he made the suggestion that would change everything. Riverside Home Solutions had just posted an opening for a customer relations manager position. Our previous manager, Janet, had retired after 15 years, and Robert Hayes was looking for someone with fresh ideas to modernize our customer service approach. Michael thought it would be perfect for Amanda. She had customer service experience, she needed a fresh start, and hey, wouldn't it be nice to have family nearby? I should have trusted my gut when every fiber of my being screamed that this was a terrible idea. But Michael looked so hopeful, and Amanda had seemed genuinely grateful when I offered to put in a good word with Robert. She'd even taken me out for coffee to thank me, gushing about how much this opportunity meant to her and how she was ready to really commit to building a career somewhere. She seemed different than the Amanda I'd heard about in Michael's stories, more mature, more focused. What an absolute fool I was. The first red flag should have been how quickly Robert agreed to interview her. When I mentioned that my sister-in-law was interested in the position, his eyes lit up in a way that made me slightly uncomfortable. Robert Hayes was a good CEO, but he was also a 50-something divorced man who had a weakness for what he called ambitious young women. Amanda, with her long blonde hair, bright smile, and carefully crafted story about wanting to revolutionize customer experience, hit every single one of his buttons. She got the job within a week. Amanda started at Riverside Home Solutions on a rainy Monday morning in March, and I made sure to be there early to welcome her. I'd even brought coffee from her favorite place and had prepared a little orientation packet with all the insider information a new employee might need. Which bathroom had the best lighting, where to find decent lunch nearby, which conference rooms had the reliable Wi-Fi. I wanted her to succeed not just because she was family, but because I'd stuck my neck out recommending her. The customer service department at Riverside was located on the second floor of our building, right above the main showroom where customers could see displays of our kitchen and bathroom renovation packages. Amanda's office had a window overlooking the employee parking lot, and she'd immediately set about personalizing it with plants and motivational posters. She seemed to throw herself into the role with impressive enthusiasm, staying late her first week to review customer files and develop what she called streamlined complaint resolution protocols. For the first month, everything seemed perfect. Customer service metrics actually improved under Amanda's management. Response times got faster, and she implemented a new tracking system that made it easier to follow up on resolved issues. Robert Hayes was clearly impressed, mentioning Amanda's innovative approach in multiple staff meetings. Michael was thrilled that his sister was finally finding her professional footing, and I felt vindicated in my decision to help her get the job. The first sign that something was wrong came during our monthly cross-departmental meeting in April. These meetings were designed to help different teams coordinate their efforts and share feedback. Marketing would present upcoming campaigns, customer service would report on recurring issues, and operations would update everyone on inventory and logistics. It was usually pretty routine stuff. Amanda had prepared an elaborate PowerPoint presentation about customer complaint trends, complete with charts and graphs that looked impressively professional. But as she clicked through her slides, a sick feeling started growing in my stomach. According to her data, there had been a significant spike in complaints related to marketing materials and promotional campaigns. Customers were apparently confused by our advertising, frustrated by misleading product descriptions, and angry about promotions that didn't deliver what they promised. As you can see, Amanda said, her voice taking on a concerned tone as she gestured to a particularly damning chart, marketing-related complaints have increased by 47% since the beginning of the quarter. Customers are telling us they feel misled by our promotional materials, and it's creating a real trust issue. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. My face burned with embarrassment and confusion. I knew our campaigns inside and out. I personally reviewed every piece of copy, every promotion, every product description that went out. There was no way we were misleading customers on that scale. I'm sorry, I interrupted, trying to keep my voice steady, but I haven't seen any of these complaints come through the usual channel. Could you forward me the specific customer feedback you're referencing? I'd like to review the exact issues so we can address them. Amanda's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. Of course, Jessica. I'll send you a summary report after the meeting. We want to make sure marketing has all the information they need to improve. The way she said improve made my skin crawl. There was something condescending about it, something that suggested the problems were obvious and I'd been negligent in not catching them myself. But I nodded professionally and made a note to follow up with her immediately after the meeting. Robert Hayes looked concerned as he jotted down notes. This is definitely something we need to address quickly, he said. Jessica, can you work with Amanda to identify the specific issues and develop a plan to fix them? Absolutely, I replied, though my mind was racing. Something about Amanda's presentation felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. After the meeting, I cornered Amanda in the hallway outside the conference room. Hey, can you send me those complaint details right now? I want to dive into this immediately. Of course, she said brightly. I'll compile everything and get it to you by end of day. There's quite a bit to go through. But end of day came and went with no email from Amanda. When I stopped by her office at 6:30, she was packing up to leave. Oh, Jessica, I'm so sorry, I got completely swamped with a crisis call from a customer whose bathroom renovation was delayed. I'll definitely get you that information first thing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning came, and still no email. When I called Amanda's extension around 10 a.m., Karen Thompson, one of our longtime customer service representatives, answered. Amanda's in back-to-back meetings all morning, Karen explained, but she wanted me to tell you that she's still working on compiling that data you requested. Apparently there's a lot to organize for complaint data that should have been readily available since she'd just presented it in chart form the day before. My journalism instincts, honed during my college years writing for the university newspaper, started tingling. When someone makes specific claims with precise statistics but then can't produce the source material, there's usually a reason. I decided to do some digging of my own. Riverside Home Solutions used a customer relationship management system that tracked all interactions with clients, including complaints, compliments, and general inquiry. As the marketing coordinator, I had read-only access to customer service data so I could monitor feedback related to our campaigns and promotions. I'd checked these reports regularly over the years and had never seen anything like the trends Amanda had described. I pulled up the CRM system and started running my own reports. I filtered by complaint type, date range, and keywords related to marketing and advertising. What I found made my blood run cold. There had indeed been an increase in marketing-related complaints over the past month, but when I drilled down into the specific cases, something very strange emerged. The complaints weren't coming from a diverse range of customers spread across our usual demographic. Instead, they seemed to be clustered around a handful of very specific issues, and the language used in many of them was remarkably similar. Customer after customer complained about misleading promotional language, using almost identical phrasing. Multiple people mentioned being confused by contradictory information in our marketing materials. Several complaints referenced false advertising in ways that felt scripted rather than organic. But the most troubling discovery was in the timestamp. Many of these complaints had been logged into the system late at night or very early in the morning, during hours when our customer service department was officially closed. According to the CRM logs, they'd been entered by Amanda herself supposedly during follow-up calls with customers who had initially contacted us during business hours. I printed out every single complaint and spread them across my desk like pieces of a puzzle. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. Someone was manufacturing complaints, creating a false narrative about marketing department failures, and that someone had administrative access to our customer database. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone to call Mike. I needed to talk this through with someone I trusted before I made any accusations. But as I started dialing, Amanda appeared in my office doorway. "Jessica, I'm so glad I caught you. I finally have that complaint data you requested." She held up a thick manila folder with a satisfied smile. "I think you're going to find this very illuminating." I stared at her, this woman I'd welcomed into our company, this woman who'd sat at our dinner table just 3 nights ago laughing at Michael's stories about his college roommate. She looked so normal, so professional in her navy blue blazer and carefully styled hair. But now I could see something else lurking behind her bright expression, something calculating and cold. "That's great, Amanda," I managed to say. "I've actually been doing some research of my own. Maybe we should sit down together and compare notes." Her smile flickered for just a moment. "Oh, what kind of research?" "Just running some reports through the CRM system. You know how I like to dig into the data." I gestured to the printed complaints covering my desk. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm finding some really interesting patterns." Amanda's eyes swept across the paperwork, and I watched her face carefully. A good journalist learns to read micro-expressions, those tiny involuntary reactions that reveal what someone is really thinking. What I saw in Amanda's face during that brief moment was recognition followed immediately by calculation. She knew exactly what I'd found, and she was already figuring out her next move. "Well," she said, her voice still bright but with a new edge to it, "I'm sure my compiled report will help clarify any confusion. Why don't I email it to you right now?" She pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. Within seconds, my computer chimed with a new message. Amanda Walsh had sent me a detailed report with exactly the kind of comprehensive complaint analysis I'd been requesting. The kind of report that should have taken hours to compile but had apparently been ready to send all along. As I opened the attachment, Amanda lingered in my doorway. "You know, Jessica, I really admire how thorough you are. It's exactly the kind of attention to detail that will help us get to the bottom of these customer satisfaction issues." There was something in her tone that made me look up from my screen. She was still smiling, but her eyes had gone completely cold. "I'm sure we'll figure out exactly what's been going wrong," she continued, "and more importantly, who's responsible for fixing it." After she left, I sat in my office staring at her report. It was comprehensive, well-formatted, and completely damning. According to Amanda's analysis, the marketing department's recent campaigns had generated more complaints than any promotional period in company history. She'd included customer quotes, statistical breakdowns, and a detailed timeline that painted a picture of systematic failure on my part. But I now knew something Amanda didn't realize I knew. I had evidence that many of these complaints were fabricated. The question was, what was I going to do about it? As I locked the printed complaints in my desk drawer, I realized that Amanda had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. She'd assumed that I would take her word for it, that I would accept responsibility for problems I hadn't created, and that I would quietly allow her to destroy my reputation while building her own. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 5 years learning this business inside and out. I knew our customers, our systems, and our data better than anyone except maybe Robert Hayes himself. More importantly, I'd spent my college years as an investigative journalist, and once you learn how to dig for the truth, it becomes second nature. Amanda wanted to play games with my career, fine, but she was about to learn that I didn't lose games. I cared about winning. I opened a new document on my computer and started typing. If Amanda wanted a war, I would give her one, but unlike her, I wouldn't need to fabricate evidence. The truth would be devastating enough. The next morning I arrived at Riverside Home Solutions, 45 minutes early, clutching a large coffee, and armed with a plan. If Amanda was manipulating our customer database to create false complaints, I needed to understand exactly how she was doing it, and gather irrefutable proof. My journalism training had taught me that accusations without solid evidence are just gossip, and gossip gets you fired. Evidence gets you justice. I made my way to the IT department, which was basically just David Kim, sitting in a closet-sized office, surrounded by servers and energy drink cans. David had been with the company for 3 years, ever since graduating from Portland State, with a computer science degree. He was quiet, methodical, and had the kind of technical knowledge that made him invaluable to a company like ours, that was still catching up with modern technology. "David," I said, knocking on his open door, "I need a favor, and it might be a little complicated." He looked up from his monitor, where lines of code scrolled past at a speed that made my eyes hurt. "Hey Jessica, what's going on?" I stepped into his office, and closed the door behind me. "I need to understand how our CRM system logs customer interactions. Specifically, I need to know if there's a way to track who enters data, when they enter it, and whether there's any way to tell if information has been modified after the initial entry." David leaned back in his chair, studying my face, with the kind of careful attention that told me he sensed this wasn't a routine request. "That's pretty specific. Is there a particular reason you need this information?" I'd rehearsed this conversation during my drive to work, trying to figure out how much to reveal without sounding paranoid or accusatory. David was trustworthy, but he was also careful about company policies, and wouldn't help me do anything that could get either of us in trouble. "I'm seeing some inconsistencies in customer complaint data that don't match up with what I know about our recent campaigns. I want to make sure I understand how the information flows through our system before I raise any concerns with management." David nodded slowly. "The CRM does keep detailed logs of all user activity. Every time someone accesses a customer record, enters new information, or modifies existing data, the system creates a timestamp with the user ID. It's part of our data integrity protocols." He paused, then added, "Why do you think someone's been entering false information?" The direct question caught me off guard. David was clearly sharper than I'd given him credit for. "I'm not sure yet," I admit, "but I'd like to rule out that possibility before I start questioning the validity of what I'm seeing in reports." "Okay," David said, turning back to his computer. "I can pull the access logs for the customer service database. What date range are you interested in?" "Let's start with the past 6 weeks," I said. "Basically, since Amanda started as the customer relations manager." David's fingers flew across his keyboard, and within minutes, he had several screens of data pulled up. "Here's what I'm seeing," he said, pointing to a spreadsheet full of timestamps and user IDs. This shows every interaction with customer records during that period. Most of the entries are during normal business hours, which makes sense, since that's when our customer service team is taking calls and processing complaints. He scrolled down through the data, and I watched the timestamps carefully. Most entries clustered between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., with a few scattered interactions in the early evening from customer service reps finishing up paperwork. But as David continued scrolling, a different pattern emerged. "That's interesting," David murmured, highlighting a series of entries. "There are quite a few interactions happening late at night and early in the morning. See these: 2 a.m., 3:15 a.m., 5:30 a.m., and they're all coming from the same user ID." My heart started racing. Which user? David clicked on one of the highlighted entries, and Amanda's employee information popped up on the screen. Amanda Walsh. She's been accessing customer records at some pretty unusual hours. What exactly is she doing during these late-night sessions? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. David clicked through several more screens, diving deeper into the system logs. "It looks like she's creating new customer interaction records, logging complaints, basically. But here's what's weird." He pointed to a series of entries from 3 a.m., the previous Tuesday. "She's creating records for customers who don't exist in our main database." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean they don't exist?" "Look at this," David said, pulling up another screen. "She's logging a complaint from someone named Robert Martinez about misleading advertising in our spring promotion. But when I search for Robert Martinez in our customer database, there's no record of anyone by that name ever purchasing from us or even requesting information." He ran similar searches for several other names associated with the late-night complaint entries. None of them existed in our system. Amanda wasn't just manipulating existing customer records, she was creating entirely fictional customers and fabricating their complaint. "David," I said quietly, "how many of these fake complaint entries are there?" His fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard as he ran queries and cross-referenced data. After several minutes, he looked up at me with an expression that was part amazement and part disgust. 47, he said. 47 completely fabricated customer complaints, all entered by Amanda Walsh during off hours over the past month, and they're all focused on the same themes: misleading marketing materials, false advertising, and customer confusion about promotional offers. I sank into the chair next to David's desk, my mind reeling. 47 fake complaints. That was more than enough to skew our customer satisfaction metrics and make it look like the marketing department was failing catastrophically. It was systematic, calculated, and absolutely diabolical. "There's something else," David said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "These aren't just random entries. Look at the timing." He pulled up a calendar view that showed when each fake complaint had been logged. "She's been strategically spacing them out to create the appearance of an escalating problem. A few complaints in week 1, more in week 2, and so on. It's designed to look like customer satisfaction is building over time." The sophistication of Amanda's scheme was breathtaking and terrifying. This wasn't the work of someone acting impulsively or emotionally. This was the work of someone who had planned this campaign of sabotage from the moment she walked through our door. "David, I need you to document all of this," I said. "Every fake entry, every timestamp, every detail about how these records were created. Can you put together a comprehensive report that proves what's been happening?" "Absolutely," he said, already turning back to his computer. "But Jessica, this is seriously messed up. Why would she do something like this?" That was the question I'd been asking myself since I first noticed the pattern in the complaint data. Why would Amanda systematically try to destroy my reputation and potentially damage the company that had just hired her? What did she have to gain from making the marketing department look incompetent? "I don't know yet," I told David, "but I intend to find out." I left David's office with a promise that he would have a detailed technical report ready by the end of the day. But as I walked back to my desk,
My mind was already moving beyond the immediate question of how Amanda was sabotaging me to the more complex question of why. The rest of the morning crawled by as I tried to focus on my regular work while my brain spun through possibilities. During my lunch break, I decided to do some additional research. If Amanda was playing a longer game than I'd initially realized, there might be other signs of her true intention. I started by pulling up her employment application, which I could access through our HR system since I'd been involved in the hiring process. Reading through it again with my new perspective, several things jumped out at me that I'd overlooked the first time. Amanda had listed her previous job as customer service specialist at Northwest Solutions Group, a company I'd never heard of. When I searched for Northwest Solutions Group online, I found a basic website that looked like it had been thrown together quickly. The company claimed to provide comprehensive customer experience consulting, but had no client testimonials, no detailed service descriptions, and no verifiable contact information beyond a generic email address. I dug deeper, using some of the research techniques I'd learned in journalism school. A reverse domain lookup showed that the website had been registered just 2 months before Amanda applied for our position. The registration information was private, but the hosting service was the same one used by several other suspicious-looking businesses that appeared to exist only on paper. My suspicions were growing by the minute. I searched for Northwest Solutions Group in combination with Amanda's name, and found nothing. No LinkedIn profiles, no business registration records, no mentions in any trade publications or local business directory. It was as if the company had been created specifically to serve as a fake reference for Amanda's job application. But why would someone go to such elaborate lengths to get hired at Riverside Home Solutions? We were a successful regional business, but we weren't exactly a Fortune 500 company with massive salaries or prestigious positions. What could Amanda possibly want from us that would justify this level of deception? The answer hit me as I was walking back from lunch. It wasn't about what she wanted from the company, it was about what she wanted from me. I thought back to the family dynamics that Michael had described over the years. Amanda had always been the younger sister who felt overlooked and underachieved. According to Michael, she'd struggled with jealousy issues since childhood, particularly when it came to other women who she perceived as more successful or favored. When Michael and I had gotten married, Amanda had made several comments about how lucky I was to have found such a great guy, and how she hoped she'd be able to land someone like that someday. At the time I'd chalked it up to normal single-person envy, but now I wondered if there had been deeper resentment brewing. Then there was the matter of the marketing director position. Robert Hayes had been dropping hints for months that he was planning to create the role and that I was the front runner for the promotion. It would come with a significant salary increase, more responsibility, and a level of authority that would make me one of the most senior employees at the company. What if Amanda's entire scheme wasn't just about damaging my reputation? What if it was about positioning herself to take over my role? If she could successfully frame me as incompetent and get me fired or demoted, she might be able to convince Robert that she was the solution to our marketing problems. After all, she was the one who had identified the issues with our campaigns and documented the customer dissatisfaction. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Amanda wasn't just trying to destroy me professionally, she was trying to steal my career, my position, and quite possibly my merit. Because if she succeeded in ruining my reputation at work, it would inevitably strain my relationship with Michael. He would be caught between defending his wife and supporting his sister, and that kind of family conflict could tear our marriage apart. By the time I got back to my office, I was convinced that I was dealing with something much more serious than simple workplace sabotage. This was a comprehensive attack on my entire life, carefully planned and methodically executed by someone who had been studying me and my vulnerabilities for months. I needed more evidence, and I needed to understand the full scope of Amanda's plan. That meant I had to start thinking like an investigative journalist again, not just a marketing coordinator who had stumbled onto some irregularities in customer data. I pulled out a notebook and started mapping out everything I knew about Amanda's activities since she'd started at Riverside. The fake complaints were just one piece of a larger puzzle. I needed to figure out what other moves she might be making, and what her ultimate endgame looked like. First, I made a list of all the key relationships and resources at our company. Robert Hayes was obviously the most important, since he made final decisions about hiring, firing, and promotion.
Lisa Rodriguez, in HR, would be crucial for any personnel actions. The other department heads had varying levels of influence, but Tom Bradley in operations and Sarah Mitchell in accounting both had Robert's ear. Next, I thought about what information Amanda would need to build a case against me. She already had access to customer service data, which she was manipulating to create the appearance of marketing failures. But what else might she be doing to strengthen her position? The thought made my blood run cold. If Amanda was sophisticated enough to create fake customer complaints and fabricate an entire previous employer, what other documentation might she be falsifying? What if she was also manipulating other types of data to support her narrative about my incompetence? I spent the rest of the afternoon discreetly checking various company systems and databases. I pulled reports on website traffic, social media engagement, and campaign performance metrics. I reviewed email communications between marketing and other departments. I even checked our vendor relationships to make sure no one was reporting problems with marketing-related projects. Everything looked normal. Our actual performance metrics were strong, our interdepartmental relationships were solid, and our vendors were satisfied with our work. The only place where problems appeared was in Amanda's customer service reports, which I now knew were based on fabricated data. But as I was reviewing email communications, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Several of the other department heads had started asking questions about marketing performance over the past few weeks. Tom Bradley had sent me a casual email asking if we were seeing any issues with customer feedback on recent promotion. Sarah Mitchell had mentioned during a brief hallway conversation that she'd heard there might be some concerns about marketing ROI. These weren't random inquiries. Someone had been planting seeds of doubt about my department's performance throughout the company, and that someone had access to the kind of detailed operational information that would allow them to have credible conversations with various department heads. Amanda wasn't just manipulating customer service data. She was conducting a whisper campaign designed to undermine confidence in my work across the entire organization. She was probably having informal conversations with key employees, sharing her concerns about marketing performance and positioning herself as the diligent manager who was trying to address problems that I was either ignoring or covering up. It was brilliant, in a completely evil way. By the time I figured out what was happening, she would have already poisoned the well with most of the people whose opinions mattered to Robert Hayes. Even if I could prove that the customer complaints were fake, I would still have to deal with the broader perception that there were concerns about my competence. I was starting to understand just how thoroughly I'd been outmaneuvered. Amanda had been playing a completely different game than I realized, and she'd been playing it since before she even applied for the job. While I'd been focused on doing good work and building professional relationships, she'd been systematically laying the groundwork to destroy me. But understanding the scope of her scheme also gave me an advantage. Now that I knew what I was really dealing with, I could start developing a counter-strategy, and unlike Amanda, I wouldn't need to rely on lies and fabricated evidence. I had the truth on my side, along with 5 years of documented success and strong relationships with people who knew the quality of my work. The question was whether I could expose Amanda's deception before she succeeded in convincing Robert Hayes that I needed to be removed from my position. Based on the timeline of her fake complaints, and the increasing frequency of the concerns being raised by other department heads, I estimated that I had maybe 2 weeks before she would make her final move. 2 weeks to gather irrefutable evidence of her sabotage campaign. 2 weeks to build a case that would not only clear my name, but also expose Amanda as the calculating fraud she really was. 2 weeks to save my career, my reputation, and quite possibly my marriage. As I locked my desk and prepared to leave the office, I realized that I was actually looking forward to the challenge. Amanda might have thought she was hunting a naive marketing coordinator who would crumble under pressure. Instead, She'd picked a fight with someone who had spent 4 years learning how to investigate corruption and expose the truth. She was about to discover that she'd made a very serious mistake. The drive home gave me time to think about my next move. I needed to be strategic about how I approached this investigation. If Amanda suspected that I was onto her scheme, she might accelerate her timeline or find ways to cover her tracks. I had to gather evidence carefully and quietly, building an airtight case before revealing what I'd discovered. I also needed to consider the family dynamics involved. Michael genuinely cared about his sister and would be devastated to learn that she'd been systematically trying to destroy his wife's career. I couldn't just dump this information on him without being absolutely certain of my facts and having a plan for how to handle the inevitable family crisis that would follow. But first I needed to understand exactly what Amanda's endgame looked like. Was she planning to get me fired and then apply for my position? Was she hoping to damage my marriage by creating professional stress and conflict? Or was there something even more sinister going on that I hadn't figured out yet? As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed that Michael's car wasn't there yet. He usually worked later than I did, which would give me some time to process everything I'd learned and figure out how to approach the conversation I would eventually need to have with him. Our house felt different as I walked through the front door, like I was seeing it with new eyes. This was the life that Amanda was trying to destroy. The home Michael and I had built together, the future we were planning, the stability and happiness we'd worked so hard to achieve. She wasn't just attacking my career, she was attacking everything that mattered to me. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at our kitchen table, looking out at the garden we'd planted together last spring. The flowers were just starting to bloom, and I found myself thinking about how much work it takes to build something beautiful, and how quickly it can be destroyed by someone with malicious intent. But gardens can be protected, and they can recover from damage if you're willing to put in the effort to defend them. My career, my marriage, and my life were worth fighting for. Amanda might have gotten the first few moves in this game, but she was about to learn that I could play just as strategically as she could, and unlike her, I wouldn't have to lie to win. That evening, Michael came home in an unusually good mood, practically bouncing through the door with a grin that immediately put me on edge. After the day I'd had discovering the extent of Amanda's deception, his cheerfulness felt almost surreal. "You'll never guess what happened today," he said, dropping his laptop bag and pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. "Amanda called me at lunch and she's absolutely thriving at Riverside. She told me how grateful she is that you helped her get the position, and how much she's learning from watching how you handle the marketing side of things." I felt my stomach clench as Michael continued talking, completely oblivious to the irony of his words. Amanda was indeed learning from watching me, but not in the way he imagined. She was studying my work patterns, my relationships, and my vulnerabilities, so she could exploit them more effectively. She mentioned that you two have been collaborating on some customer satisfaction initiatives. Michael went on, heading to the kitchen to grab a beer. "She's really impressed with your analytical skills and how you dig into data to solve problems. She said you've been helping her understand the connection between marketing campaigns and customer feedback. The manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly crafted, that I almost had to admire Amanda's skill. She was feeding Michael just enough truthful information to make her lies believable, while simultaneously positioning herself as the admiring younger sister-in-law who was learning from my expertise. If I tried to tell Michael what was really happening, it would sound paranoid and petty compared to the positive narrative Amanda had already established. "That's nice," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She's definitely been very interested in understanding our customer data." Michael opened his beer and leaned against the kitchen counter, studying my face with the kind of attention that told me he'd picked up on something in my tone. After 3 years of marriage, he could read my moods better than I sometimes liked. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You seem a little tense." This was the moment I'd been dreading since I'd discovered the fake complaints. "How do you tell your husband that his beloved sister is systematically trying to destroy your career? How do you explain that the family member he'd been worried about and wanted to help is actually a calculating predator who had been planning this attack for months?" "Just a long day," I said, which was technically true. We're dealing with some customer service issues that are going to require some investigation. Amanda mentioned that too, Michael said, taking a sip of his beer. She said there have been some complaints about marketing materials, but she's confident you'll figure out what's going wrong and fix it. She really has a lot of faith in your abilities. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. Amanda was so confident in her scheme that she was actually discussing it with Michael, framing herself as my supportive colleague, who believed in my ability to solve the very problem she was creating. It was psychological warfare of the highest order. I excused myself to take a shower, needing some time alone to process the conversation and figure out my next steps. As the hot water ran over my shoulders, I realized that Amanda's manipulation of Michael was actually another piece of evidence I could use against her. She was being so specific about our supposed collaboration that she was creating a trail of statements that could be fact-checked and disproven. But I also realized that I was running out of time faster than I'd initially thought. If Amanda was already setting up the narrative with Michael about marketing problems that needed to be solved, she was probably having similar conversations with other people. The whisper campaign I'd suspected was likely more advanced than I'd realized. After my shower, I sat down at my laptop and started documenting everything I'd learned. I created a detailed timeline of Amanda's activities, from her initial job application with the fake references, through the systematic creation of false customer complaints. I included screenshots of the CRM data that David had helped me access, along with my analysis of the patterns in the complaint, timing, and content. But as I worked on the documentation, I realized that I needed more than just proof of what Amanda was doing. I needed to understand her full strategy and gather evidence of her broader manipulation campaign. The fake complaints were damning, but they were just one aspect of what appeared to be a comprehensive plan to destroy my professional reputation. I decided to start by examining Amanda's interactions with other employees more closely. If she was conducting a whisper campaign, there would be traces of it in her email communications, her meeting schedules, and her general patterns of behavior around the office. The next morning, I arrived at work early again, but this time I had a different mission. I needed to understand who Amanda had been talking to and what she'd been telling them. This would require some careful social engineering, but my journalism background had taught me how to extract information from people without making them suspicious. My first stop was Karen Thompson, the longtime customer service representative, who had answered Amanda's phone the day before. Karen had been with Riverside for 8 years and knew the company culture better than almost anyone. She was also naturally chatty and would likely share information freely if I approached the conversation correctly. I found Karen in the break room, preparing her morning coffee with the kind of elaborate ritual that suggested she was a serious caffeine enthusiast. She looked up when I entered and smiled warmly. "Morning, Jessica. How are things in the marketing world?" "Busy as always," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee and settling into the chair across from her. "I've been working with Amanda on some customer feedback analysis. She seems to be really getting into the details of how our departments interact." Karen's expression shifted slightly, and I caught a flicker of something that might have been discomfort. "Yes. She's been very interested in understanding all the different aspects of the business. Very thorough." The way she emphasized thorough made me think there was more to the story. I decided to probe a little deeper. "It's great that she's so engaged," I said casually. "I imagine she's been asking lots of questions about how things work around here." "Oh yes," Karen said, her voice taking on a slightly strained quality. "Lots of questions about processes, about people, about everything really." I sensed an opening. That must be helpful for getting her up to speed. "But I imagine it also takes up quite a bit of your time." Karen glanced around the break room to make sure we were alone, then leaned forward slightly. "Jessica, can I ask you something? Has Amanda mentioned anything to you about concerns with our customer service procedures?" My pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of information I needed. "What kind of concern?" "Well," Karen said, lowering her voice, "she's been asking a lot of questions about how we handle complaints, especially complaints about marketing material. She wanted to know if we ever had issues with customers feeling misled by promotional information, and whether we'd had any problems with false advertising claims. Did you tell her that we haven't had those kinds of issues? I asked. Karen looked uncomfortable. I told her that marketing complaints are pretty rare, and that when we do get them, they're usually just misunderstandings that get cleared up quickly. But she seemed to think there might be more problems than I was aware of. She asked me to keep track of any complaints that came in, and to make sure I documented them thoroughly. Has she asked you to change how you normally handle these situations? Not exactly, Karen said slowly, but she did suggest that I might be missing some of the subtler signs of customer satisfaction. She said that sometimes customers don't complain directly, but they express frustration in ways that we might not be picking up on. I felt a chill run down my spine. Amanda was coaching Karen to interpret normal customer interactions as signs of marketing-related problems. She was essentially training the customer service staff to see issues that didn't exist, which would provide additional support for her narrative about widespread marketing failures. Has she given you any specific examples of what to look for? I asked. She mentioned that customers might use words like confused or disappointed when they're actually upset about misleading advertising. And she suggested that if customers ask questions about promotional details, it might indicate that our marketing materials weren't clear enough. This was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. Amanda wasn't just creating fake complaints. She was also manipulating the customer service staff to reinterpret legitimate customer interactions in ways that would support her accusations against the marketing department. Every routine question or minor clarification request would become evidence of marketing failure. That's interesting, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Have you noticed an increase in those kinds of interactions since she started tracking them? Karen hesitated. Well, now that she's pointed them out, I guess I have been noticing them more. But honestly, Jessica, I'm not sure if there are actually more problems or if I'm just more aware of them, because she's asked me to pay attention. That makes sense, I said. Sometimes when you start looking for something specific, you become more sensitive to it. I finished my coffee and excused myself, but the conversation had given me crucial information about Amanda's strategy. She wasn't just manipulating data, she was manipulating people, training them to see reality through the lens of her fabricated narrative. It was a level of psychological manipulation that went far beyond simple workplace sabotage. My next stop was Tom Bradley's office. As the operations manager, Tom would be someone that Amanda might approach about supply chain or logistics issues that could potentially be blamed on marketing promises. I needed to find out what kinds of conversations she'd been having with him. Tom was reviewing inventory reports when I knocked on his doorframe. He looked up and waved me in with the kind of distracted friendliness that suggested he was multitasking. Hey Jessica, what can I do for you? I wanted to follow up on that email you sent about customer feedback on our recent promotions, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Have you been hearing specific concerns from customers or vendors? Tom looked puzzled for a moment, then seemed to remember the email I was referencing. Oh right, that wasn't really based on direct feedback I'd received. Amanda Walsh mentioned during our department heads meeting that she was seeing some patterns in customer complaints, and she suggested that other departments might want to be aware of potential issues. What kinds of patterns did she describe? She said customers were reporting confusion about promotional terms and delivery expectations, Tom said. She thought it might be helpful for operations to review our fulfillment processes to make sure we're meeting the commitments that marketing is making in our campaign. I felt the familiar chill of recognition. Amanda was working systematically through each department, planting seeds of doubt about marketing's competence, and suggesting that other departments might need to compensate for our supposed failure. She was essentially building a coalition of managers who believed there were problems with my work, even though none of them had direct evidence of any issues. Did she provide specific examples of the customer complaints she was referring to? I asked. Not specific examples, no, Tom said, but she seemed to have pretty detailed data about the trends she was seeing. She mentioned that she was working on a comprehensive analysis that would be ready to present to Robert soon. My heart sank. Amanda was preparing for a formal presentation to Robert Hayes, and she was laying the groundwork by having conversations with other department heads that would support her finding. When she finally made her move, she would have backing from multiple managers who believed they'd independently identified problems with marketing performance. When is she planning to present this analysis? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. I think she mentioned next week's management meeting, Tom said. She wanted to make sure all the department heads had a chance to review their own data first, so we could provide comprehensive feedback. Next week, I had less time than I'd thought. Amanda was planning to present her fabricated case against me in just a few days, and she'd already primed the other managers to support her conclusions. If I was going to stop her, I needed to act quickly. I spent the rest of the morning discreetly checking with other department heads, and the pattern was consistent across the board. Amanda had approached each of them with concerns about marketing-related issues, always framed as helpful collaboration, and always supported by vague references to customer feedback data that she claimed to be analyzed. Sarah Mitchell in accounting had been asked to review marketing budget allocations to see if there were any spending patterns that might explain customer dissatisfaction. The facilities manager had been asked about whether our showroom displays accurately represented the promotional offers being advertised. Even the HR director had been approached about whether there might be training opportunities to help the marketing department better understand customer needs. It was a masterclass in organizational manipulation. By the time Amanda made her formal presentation, every department head would believe they'd been part of identifying the problems she was about to reveal. They would see themselves as contributors to the solution rather than victims of her deception. But Amanda's thoroughness was also her weakness. She'd involved so many people and made so many specific claims that there were multiple ways to fact-check her story. If I could systematically debunk her accusations and expose the manufactured evidence, the entire house of cards would collapse. I returned to my office and immediately called David Kim. I need that technical report as soon as possible, I told him, and I need you to expand it to include a complete audit of all customer service database interactions over the past 2 months. Can you identify every fake entry and document exactly how and when it was created? Already working on it, David said. But Jessica, there's something else you need to know. I've been monitoring database access since our conversation yesterday, and Amanda has been unusually active in the system. She's created 6 new fake complaints in the past 24 hours. 6 more? I felt a surge of anger. Even knowing that I was onto her, Amanda was continuing to sabotage me. What's different about these new ones? They're more sophisticated, David said. Instead of creating completely fictional customers, she's been modifying records for real customers who haven't contacted us recently. She's adding complaint narratives to existing customer profiles, which makes the entries look more legitimate on the surface. This escalation confirmed my suspicion that Amanda was accelerating her timeline. She was adding final touches to her fabricated evidence in preparation for her presentation to Robert Hayes. But her increased activity also gave me more evidence of her systematic fraud. Can you document the before and after states of those modified records? I asked. Already done, David said. I've got screenshots showing exactly what each record looked like before her modifications and what she changed. It's pretty clear evidence of data manipulation. Perfect. How soon can you have the complete report ready? Give me until end of day, David said. I want to make sure I've captured everything, and that the documentation is bulletproof. After hanging up with David, I turned my attention to gathering evidence of Amanda's whisper campaign. I started by reviewing meeting schedules and email communications to see if I could trace her interactions with other department heads. The beauty of working in a modern office environment is that almost everything leaves a digital trail if you know where to look. I accessed the shared calendar system and searched for meetings involving Amanda and various department heads. What I found was a systematic pattern of one-on-one meetings over the past 3 weeks, always scheduled during lunch hours or at the end of the day when they would be less likely to attract attention. Amanda had met privately with Tom Bradley, Sarah Mitchell, Lisa Rodriguez, and 3 other department heads. Each meeting was listed as operational coordination or process improvement discussion, generic descriptions that wouldn't raise suspicions but would give her the opportunity to plant seeds of doubt about marketing performance. I also searched through the company's instant messaging system for conversations involving Amanda,
While I couldn't access the content of private messages, I could see who she'd been communicating with and when. The pattern showed frequent communications with key influencers throughout the organization, always timed around her meetings with department heads. The picture that emerged was of a sophisticated influence campaign designed to create the impression that marketing problems were widespread and growing. Amanda had been working methodically through the company's power structure, building consensus around a narrative that would destroy my credibility when she finally presented her fabricated evidence. But understanding her strategy also gave me the tools to counter it. I knew who she'd been talking to and roughly what she'd been telling them. I could fact-check her claims systematically and demonstrate that the problems she'd described didn't exist outside of her manufactured evidence. The question was whether I should try to address this privately, or go directly to Robert Hayes with what I'd discovered. If I approached the other department heads individually, I might be able to undermine Amanda's narrative before her presentation. But I also risked looking defensive or paranoid, especially since they'd all had positive interactions with Amanda and might not believe that she was capable of such systematic deception. On the other hand, if I went directly to Robert with my evidence, I could present a comprehensive case that would expose not just the fake complaints, but also the broader manipulation campaign. The risk was that Robert might want to handle the situation quietly, which could give Amanda the opportunity to cover her tracks or spin the situation to her advantage. As I weighed these options, my phone rang. It was Mike. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying an odd tension that immediately put me on alert. "I just had lunch with Amanda, and she mentioned that she's been working on some kind of big project related to customer satisfaction. She seemed pretty excited about it, but also kind of nervous. Do you know what that's about?" I felt my chest tighten. Amanda was discussing her plan with Michael, probably trying to prepare him for the professional difficulties that were about to hit his wife. She was positioning herself as the caring sister-in-law who was working hard to help solve problems that I had supposedly created or ignored. "She's been analyzing customer feedback data," I said carefully. "I think she's planning to present some findings to manage." She said something about how challenging it must be for you to deal with customer complaints about marketing. Michael continued, "She really admires how you handle criticism and work to improve things. She said she hopes her analysis will help you identify areas where the marketing approach might need some adjustments." The manipulation was so smooth that it took my breath away. Amanda was simultaneously undermining me professionally and positioning herself as my supportive advocate in Michael's mind. When her accusations came to light, Michael would remember this conversation and believe that Amanda had been trying to help me all along. "That's thoughtful of her," I managed to say. "She also mentioned that she's been learning a lot from watching how you approach data analysis and problem solving." Michael said, "She said you've been really generous with your time and expertise, helping her understand how marketing and customer service intersect." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of Amanda's psychological chess game settling over me like a suffocating blanket. She had been studying me, learning my methods and my relationships, all while systematically destroying my professional reputation, and she'd been using my own husband as an unwitting accomplice in her manipulation campaign. "Listen, I need to get back to work," I told Mike. "We can talk more about this tonight." After hanging up, I sat in my office staring out the window at the Portland skyline, trying to process the full scope of what I was dealing with. Amanda wasn't just trying to get me fired or steal my job. She was trying to destroy my entire life, piece by piece, while maintaining the facade of being a loving family member who was trying to help. It was sociopathic in its calculation and execution, and it was working. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The fear and confusion I'd been feeling crystallized into something much more powerful: cold, focused anger. Amanda had made the mistake of thinking that I would be an easy target, someone who would crumble under pressure and accept defeat gracefully.
She was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong person to destroy. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to Robert Hayes. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the attack. But I wasn't going to make the same mistake Amanda had made. I wasn't going to rely on manipulation or deception. I was going to use the truth, and the truth was about to be devastating. The email to Robert Hayes sat in my drafts folder for 2 hours while I refined every word, every piece of evidence. every logical connection that would expose Amanda's systematic fraud. I wasn't just writing a complaint, I was building a prosecutorial case that would leave no room for doubt or manipulation. "Robert," I began, "I need to bring to your attention a serious situation involving data manipulation and deliberate sabotage that directly affects our company's integrity and decision-making processes. Over the past several days, I have uncovered evidence of systematic fraud in our customer service database, along with a coordinated campaign to damage the marketing department's reputation through fabricated complaints and manufactured customer dissatisfaction metrics. I attached David's comprehensive technical report, which documented every fake complaint entry with timestamps, user access logs, and cross-references to our actual customer database. I included screenshots showing the before and after states of legitimate customer records that had been modified to include false complaint narratives. Most importantly, I provided a detailed analysis of the patterns that proved these weren't random errors or misunderstandings, but deliberate acts of deception. But the technical evidence was only part of my case. I also documented Amanda's whisper campaign, including the timeline of her meetings with department heads and the consistent narrative she'd been spreading about marketing failure. I referenced specific conversations and emails where other managers had mentioned concerns that originated with Amanda's influence, rather than their own observations. The most damning piece of evidence was Amanda's own employment application, which I had thoroughly investigated. I included documentation proving that Northwest Solutions Group, her supposed previous employer, was a fabricated company created specifically to provide fake references. I had traced the website registration, the hosting service, and even found evidence that the phone number listed for the company was actually a Google Voice account that had been created just weeks before her job application. The individual responsible for this systematic fraud, I wrote, is Amanda Walsh, our current customer relations manager. The evidence suggests that this campaign was planned before she even applied for her position, and that her entire employment with our company has been based on false pretenses. I believe her ultimate goal is to damage my professional reputation sufficiently to position herself for advancement within the marketing department. I ended the email with a request for an immediate meeting to review the evidence and discuss appropriate action. Then I took a deep breath and clicked send. The response came faster than I expected. Within 30 minutes, Robert Hayes called my direct line. "Jessica, I've reviewed your email and the attached documentation," he said, his voice carrying a gravity I'd rarely heard from him. "This is extremely serious. Can you come to my office immediately? I want to go through this evidence in detail before we take any further action." I gathered my printed copies of all the documentation and made my way to Robert's corner office. He was waiting with Lisa Rodriguez from HR, which told me he was already thinking about the legal and personnel implications of what I'd discovered. "Sit down," Robert said, gesturing to the conference table in his office. "I want you to walk us through exactly what you found and how you found it. Don't leave out any details." For the next hour, I systematically presented the evidence of Amanda's fraud. I started with the original inconsistencies I'd noticed in her customer complaint data, then showed how those inconsistencies had led me to investigate the database log. I explained David's technical analysis of the fake complaint entries and demonstrated how Amanda had been creating fictional customers and manipulating existing records. Lisa Rodriguez took detailed notes as I described Amanda's whisper campaign and her systematic approach to undermining confidence in the marketing department. When I showed them the evidence about her fake previous employer, both Robert and Lisa exchanged glances that told me they understood the full implications of what we were dealing with. "This is identity fraud," Lisa said quietly. "She falsified her employment history to obtain a position under false pretenses. That's grounds for immediate termination and potentially criminal charges." Robert was studying the technical reports with the kind of focused attention that meant he was processing not just the evidence, but the potential damage to the company's reputation and operations. "How many people has she potentially influenced with this misinformation campaign?" Based on her meeting schedule and the conversations I've traced, probably every department head and several key employees. I said. She's been very systematic about building consensus around the idea that there are widespread problems with marketing performance, and she was planning to present this fabricated evidence at next week's management meeting. Robert said, more as a statement than a question. That appears to be her timeline. Yeah. Robert stood up and began pacing behind his desk, a habit I recognized from previous crisis management situations. He was working through the potential consequences and developing a response strategy. Here's what we're going to do, he said finally. Lisa, I want you to immediately begin documentation for termination proceedings. This level of deliberate fraud and sabotage goes beyond simple misconduct. We need to protect the company from any potential legal liability. He turned to Jessica. I want you to work with David to prepare a complete forensic report of all database tampering. We need to understand the full scope of what she's done and ensure that all fraudulent data is identified and corrected. We also need to assess whether any business decisions were made based on her false information. What about the other department heads? I asked. They've been influenced by her narrative, and some of them may have already adjusted their processes based on the problems she claimed to identify. We'll address that in a company-wide meeting once we've dealt with Amanda directly, Robert said. I want to make sure everyone understands what really happened, and that there's no confusion about the actual state of our marketing performance. Lisa looked up from her note. What about the family connection? I understand she's your sister-in-law, Jessica. This could create some complicated personal dynamics. The question I'd been dreading had finally been asked directly. I'd been so focused on building the professional case against Amanda that I'd been able to temporarily set aside the personal ramifications. But now I had to confront the reality that exposing Amanda's fraud would inevitably destroy family relationships and put enormous strain on my marriage. My priority is protecting this company and the integrity of our operations, I said carefully. The personal relationships will have to be addressed separately, but they can't influence how we handle this professionally. Robert nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right approach. We'll handle this as we would any case of employee fraud, regardless of personal connections. The meeting concluded with a plan for confronting Amanda the following morning. Robert wanted to handle the termination personally, with Lisa present to ensure proper procedures were followed. I would be there to present the evidence if Amanda attempted to deny or rationalize her actions. As I walked back to my office, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat to my career was about to be resolved, but the personal consequences were just beginning. I would have to tell Michael what his sister had done, and I would have to navigate the family crisis that would inevitably follow. But first, I had one more piece of business to take care of. I wanted to understand exactly what Amanda had been planning for her presentation to management. If I could get a preview of her final attack, it would help me understand the full scope of her intentions and prepare for any remaining surprises. I called David and asked him to monitor Amanda's computer activity for the rest of the day. If she was working on presentation materials or making final adjustments to her fabricated evidence, I wanted to know about it. The information David provided was both fascinating and disturbing. Amanda had been working on an elaborate PowerPoint presentation titled Marketing Performance Crisis, Analysis and Recommendation. The presentation included fabricated statistics showing a dramatic decline in customer satisfaction, fake testimonials from supposed customers, and a detailed plan for restructuring the marketing department to address systemic performance issues. Most tellingly, the presentation included a section recommending that the customer relations manager position be expanded to include oversight of marketing campaigns and customer-facing communications. Amanda wasn't just trying to get me fired. She was positioning herself to take over significant portions of my responsibilities and establish herself as the solution to the problems she had created. The final slide of her presentation was titled Moving Forward, Building Customer Trust Through Integrated Marketing and Service Excellence. It outlined a vision for combining marketing and customer service under unified leadership, with Amanda clearly positioned as the person who would lead this integration. It was breathtaking in its ambition and calculation. Amanda had planned not just to destroy my career, but to build her own advancement on the foundation of my professional corpse. She had been playing a much longer game than I'd initially realized, with the ultimate goal of creating an entirely new power structure within the company that would place her in a position of significant authority. That evening, I sat Michael down for the conversation I'd been dreading since I first discovered Amanda's deception. I had prepared carefully, organizing my thoughts and evidence so I could present the situation clearly and objectively. "I need to tell you something about Amanda," I began, "and it's going to be very difficult to hear." Michael's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Is she okay? Did something happen at work?" "She's been systematically sabotaging my position at the company," I said gently. "She's been creating fake customer complaints, manipulating company data, and conducting a campaign to damage my professional reputation." I watched Michael's face as he processed what I was telling him. The initial confusion gave way to disbelief, then to a kind of defensive anger that I had expected. "That's impossible," he said immediately. "Amanda wouldn't do something like that. She's been grateful for your help, and she's told me how much she's learning from working with you." I had anticipated this reaction and had prepared accordingly. I pulled out printed copies of the most damning evidence, the technical report showing the fake complaint entries, the documentation of Amanda's fabricated employment history, and the timeline of her systematic manipulation campaign. "I know this is hard to believe," I said, "but the evidence is overwhelming. David from our IT department has documented every fake entry she's made in our customer data. She's been creating fictional customers and fabricating their complaints to make it look like our marketing campaigns are failing." Michael studied the technical reports with the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for debugging complex software problems. I could see him working through the implications, trying to find alternative explanations for what the data clearly showed. "Maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding," he said finally. "Maybe she was trying to help, but went about it the wrong way." "Michael," I said gently, "she created a fake company to use as a reference on her job application. She planned this entire scheme before she even applied for the position. This isn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This is deliberate fraud." I showed him the documentation about Northwest Solutions Group, walking him through the evidence that proved Amanda had fabricated her previous employment history. I explained how she had been systematically working to influence other department heads and build a case against me that she planned to present to Robert Hayes. As the weight of the evidence became undeniable, I watched Michael's defensive anger transform into something much more painful: grief. He was mourning the loss of his image of his sister, the realization that someone he loved and trusted had been capable of such calculated deception. "Why would she do this?" he asked quietly. "What did she have to gain?" "I think she wanted my job," I said, "or at least, she wanted to position herself for advancement within the marketing department. Her presentation to management included recommendations for restructuring that would have given her significant authority over marketing operations." "But you helped her get the job in the first place," Michael said, his voice filled with bewilderment. "You recommended her to Robert. Why would she attack you after you helped her?" It was the question that got to the heart of Amanda's psychology, and it was the hardest one to answer. How do you explain to someone that their sister is capable of such profound betrayal without destroying their faith in human nature entirely? "I think she saw me as competition," I said carefully. "Or maybe she resented that I had achieved the kind of professional success that she wanted for herself. Sometimes people who feel powerless try to gain power by destroying what others have built." Michael was quiet for a long time, staring at the evidence spread across our coffee table. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" "Robert is going to confront her tomorrow morning," I said. "She'll almost certainly be terminated immediately, and depending on how serious they want to get about the fraud charges, there could be legal consequences as well. And our family?" That was the question I couldn't answer. Amanda's actions would inevitably create a crisis within Michael's family that would affect every relationship and every family gathering for years to come. Michael's parents would have to choose between supporting their daughter and accepting the evidence of her misconduct. There would be accusations, denials, and probably permanent divisions that would never fully heal. "I don't know," I admitted, "but whatever happens, we'll get through it together." The next morning arrived with the kind of gray, drizzly weather that perfectly matched my mood. I arrived at the office early, wanting to be prepared for whatever drama the day would bring. David had prepared a final technical report documenting Amanda's database activity from the previous evening, which showed that she had made several more fake complaint entries even after our investigation had begun. At 9 a.m., Robert Hayes called Amanda into his office. I waited in the conference room next door, available to provide evidence if needed, but out of sight, so that Amanda wouldn't immediately realize the scope of what had been discovered. Through the thin walls, I could hear the beginning of the conversation. Robert's voice was calm but firm as he outlined the evidence of database manipulation and fraud. Amanda's initial response was predictable: confusion, denial, and attempts to rationalize what she had done. "I was just trying to be thorough in documenting customer feedback," I heard her say. "Maybe I made some mistakes in how I entered the data, but I was trying to help the company understand customer concerns." Robert's response was measured and devastating. He walked her through the technical evidence showing that she had created entirely fictional customers, pointing out that this went far beyond data entry mistakes. He presented the evidence of her fabricated employment history and explained how her systematic deception constituted fraud. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Amanda's denials becoming increasingly desperate as Robert methodically dismantled every excuse and rationalization she offered. Finally, I heard Lisa Rodriguez explaining the termination procedures and asking Amanda to surrender her company property. When Amanda emerged from Robert's office, I got my first look at her since I'd discovered her scheme. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her exposed deception, but when she saw me standing in the hallway, her expression hardened into something cold and vindictive. "I hope you're satisfied," she said, her voice carrying a bitterness that confirmed everything I'd suspected about her motivations. "You couldn't stand having me around, could you? You had to destroy me rather than share the spotlight." The accusation was so perfectly inverted from reality that it took my breath away. Even now, faced with undeniable evidence of her own systematic fraud, Amanda was trying to position herself as the victim of my jealousy and ambition. "Amanda," I said quietly, "you did this to yourself. I tried to help you succeed here. You tried to control me," she snapped back. "You couldn't handle having someone around who might be better at your job than you are." Lisa Rodriguez stepped between us before the conversation could escalate further. "Amanda, you need to collect your personal belongings and leave the premises immediately," she said firmly. I watched Amanda pack up her office, removing the plants and motivational posters she had used to personalize the space. As she worked, I found myself thinking about the person I had believed her to be when I first recommended her for the position. That Amanda, the grateful sister-in-law who wanted a fresh start and was ready to commit to building a real career, had never existed. She had been a carefully constructed fiction designed to get her through the door so she could begin her campaign of destruction. When Amanda finished packing, she walked past me without another word, but the look she gave me was filled with such pure hatred that I realized our confrontation was far from over. Amanda's termination from Riverside Home Solutions might have ended her professional attack on me, but the personal war was probably just beginning. That afternoon, Robert called a meeting with all department heads to address the situation. He explained that Amanda's employment had been terminated due to fraud and data manipulation, and that any concerns about marketing performance that had been raised based on her fabricated evidence should be disregarded. The reaction in the room was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and relief. Several managers admitted that they had been puzzled by the customer complaints Amanda had described, since they didn't match their own interactions with clients. Others expressed frustration that they had wasted time and resources addressing problems that didn't actually exist. Tom Bradley was particularly apologetic. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he said after the meeting. "I should have checked with you directly instead of assuming there were issues based on what Amanda told me." "Don't worry about it," I replied. She was very convincing, and she had what appeared to be solid data to back up her claims. Anyone would have taken her seriously.
Over the following weeks, we worked to undo the damage Amanda had caused. David helped us identify and remove all the fabricated complaint entries from our database, restoring accurate customer service metrics. We also reviewed any business decisions that had been made based on Amanda's false information, and corrected course where necessary. The most challenging aspect was rebuilding trust and confidence within the organization. Even though everyone understood that the marketing problems had been fabricated, there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty about our actual performance and customer satisfaction level. To address this, I proposed conducting a comprehensive customer satisfaction survey using an independent third-party research firm. The results would provide objective data about our actual customer relationships and help restore confidence in our marketing effectiveness. The survey results, when they came back 6 weeks later, validated everything I had believed about our performance. Customer satisfaction with our marketing communications was actually above industry averages, and there were no significant concerns about misleading advertising or promotional confusion. More importantly, the survey process demonstrated to the entire organization that we were committed to transparency and accountability. It showed that we were confident enough in our actual performance to submit to objective scrutiny, which helped rebuild the trust that Amanda's deception had undermined. On the personal front, the consequences were exactly as devastating as I had feared. Michael's parents initially refused to believe that Amanda was capable of such systematic deception, and they accused me of fabricating evidence to get her fired. Michael found himself caught in the middle, trying to support his wife while maintaining relationships with his family. The situation came to a head during a family dinner, 3 months after Amanda's termination. Michael's mother had been making pointed comments about how some people couldn't handle having successful family members around, and how jealousy could drive people to extreme action. Finally, Michael had enough. "Mom," he said firmly, "I've seen the evidence. Amanda created fake customer complaints and lied about her previous job experience. She wasn't fired because of jealousy. She was fired because she committed fraud." The argument that followed was explosive and painful, with accusations flying in every direction. Michael's parents accused him of choosing his wife over his family. Amanda, who had been relatively quiet throughout the dinner, finally spoke up with a defense that was breathtaking in its audacity. "I was trying to help the company identify real problems," she insisted. "Maybe I wasn't perfect in how I documented things, but I was trying to prevent bigger issues from developing." Jessica couldn't handle the criticism and decided to destroy me, rather than address the legitimate concerns I was raising. Even faced with her own family, Amanda maintained the fiction that she had been trying to help, that her actions were motivated by professional concern rather than personal ambition. It was a level of self-deception that made me realize we were dealing with someone who might genuinely believe her own lies. The family relationships never fully recovered. Michael's parents eventually accepted that Amanda had been fired for cause, but they never acknowledged the full scope of her deception or manipulation. Family gatherings became tense affairs where everyone carefully avoided mentioning work or career topics. Michael and I grew closer through the crisis, bonded by having survived such a systematic attack on our life together, but we both carried scars from the experience, a heightened awareness of how easily trust can be betrayed, and how much damage can be done by someone who appears to be on your side. Amanda disappeared from our lives completely after the family dinner confrontation. We heard through mutual connections that she had moved to Seattle and found another customer service job, but we never learned whether she had continued her pattern of manipulation and deception in her new position. Looking back on the entire experience now, I realize that Amanda taught me something important about human nature and professional survival. She showed me that some people view every relationship as a zero-sum game, where someone else's success automatically threatens their own prospects. She demonstrated how sophisticated manipulation can be when it's driven by genuine intelligence and careful planning, but she also taught me about my own strength and resilience. When faced with a systematic campaign to destroy my professional reputation, I didn't crumble or accept defeat. I used my skills, my relationships, and my commitment to truth to fight back and ultimately prevail. Most importantly, Amanda's attack forced me to examine and strengthen every aspect of my professional life. I became more aware of company politics and power dynamics. I developed better relationships with colleagues across all departments. I improved my documentation and communication practices to make my work more transparent and verifiable. In a strange way, surviving Amanda's sabotage made me a better employee and a stronger person. Her attempt to destroy me ended up making me more successful and more confident in my abilities. 6 months after Amanda's termination, Robert Hayes offered me the marketing director position that had been in development when the crisis began. The promotion came with increased salary, expanded responsibilities, and recognition as one of the company's key leadership team members. As I accepted the position, I couldn't help but think about how different things might have been if Amanda had chosen to succeed through merit rather than manipulation. If she had focused her intelligence and energy on doing excellent work instead of destroying others, she might have built the kind of career she obviously wanted. But Amanda had made her choices, and now I was making mine. I was choosing to build rather than destroy, to create value rather than eliminate competition, and to succeed through excellence rather than sabotage. And as I settled into my new office with its view of the Portland skyline, I realized that Amanda had actually given me a gift. She had shown me exactly what I didn't want to become, and in doing so, she had helped me become exactly who I was meant to be. The truth had won, just as I knew it would, and sometimes, that's the most satisfying victory of all. 2 years have passed since Amanda's spectacular downfall at Riverside Home Solutions, and the ripple effects of her deception continue to shape both my professional and personal life in ways I never could have anticipated. What started as a sister-in-law's calculated attempt to destroy my career has evolved into a masterclass in corporate resilience, family dynamics, and the unexpected ways that surviving betrayal can transform you into someone stronger than you ever imagined possible. The marketing director position that Robert Hayes offered me 6 months after Amanda's termination has exceeded every expectation I had when I first started climbing the corporate ladder at Riverside. The role came with not just increased salary and expanded responsibilities, but also a level of organizational influence that has allowed me to implement changes that protect the company from the kind of systematic manipulation Amanda had orchestrated. One of my first initiatives as marketing director was to establish what we now call the Data Integrity Protocol, a comprehensive system of checks and balances designed to prevent any single person from manipulating customer feedback or performance metrics without detection. Working closely with David Kim, who received a well-deserved promotion to IT security manager, we created automated systems that flag unusual data entry patterns, require multiple approvals for significant database modification, maintain detailed audit trails for all customer interaction records. The protocol has become something of a model within our industry. Other companies have reached out to learn about our approach to preventing internal data manipulation, and I've been invited to speak at several conferences about corporate security and fraud prevention.
What began as a defensive measure against one person's deception has evolved into a competitive advantage that strengthens our entire organization. But the most profound changes have been in how I approach professional relationships and office politics. Amanda's sophisticated manipulation campaign taught me to read the subtle signs of workplace dynamics that I had previously overlooked or dismissed. I've become much more attuned to the informal power structures within organizations, the ways that information flows through professional networks, and the techniques that people use to build influence behind the scenes. This enhanced awareness has made me a more effective leader and a more valuable colleague. I can now identify potential conflicts before they escalate, recognize when someone is being unfairly undermined, and intervene to protect both individual employees and organizational stability. Several junior staff members have confided that they feel more secure knowing that I understand and actively monitor the political landscape of our workplace. The investigation skills I developed while exposing Amanda's fraud have also proven invaluable in my new role. When we face customer complaints or performance issues now, I approach them with the same methodical, evidence-based analysis that helped me uncover her deception. This systematic approach has led to more effective problem-solving and has earned me a reputation for being able to get to the root of complex business challenges. Robert Hayes, who was initially skeptical about promoting someone so soon after such a major crisis, has become one of my strongest advocates. He frequently tells other executives that hiring me was one of the best decisions he's made during his tenure as CEO, and he credits my experience with Amanda as proof of my ability to handle adversity and protect the company's interests under pressure. The personal consequences of exposing Amanda's fraud were initially more devastating than the professional ones, but they too have led to unexpected growth and strengthening of relationships. Michael and I emerged from the crisis with a deeper understanding of each other and a stronger commitment to our marriage, but the path to that outcome was neither quick nor easy. The months immediately following Amanda's termination were filled with difficult conversations, family tensions, and the kind of soul-searching that forces you to examine every assumption you've made about trust, loyalty, and love. Michael struggled with guilt about bringing Amanda into our lives and anger about how thoroughly she had deceived him. He spent countless hours reviewing every interaction he'd had with his sister, looking for signs he should have recognized, warnings he should have heeded. I found myself in the unexpected position of comforting my husband about his sister's betrayal of me. Michael's pain at discovering Amanda's true nature was so profound that my own anger and hurt seemed secondary to helping him process the loss of his illusions about family loyalty. It was a strange reversal that ultimately brought us closer together as we learned to support each other through different aspects of the same traumatic experience. The family dynamics proved more complex and enduring than either of us had anticipated. Michael's parents went through their own journey of denial, anger, and eventual acceptance regarding Amanda's behavior. The process took over a year and involved several painful family meetings where old grievances and long-standing favoritism patterns were finally addressed openly. Michael's mother eventually admitted that she had always known Amanda was difficult, but had never imagined her capable of such systematic deception. She apologized to me for initially refusing to believe the evidence, and acknowledged that her protective instincts toward her daughter had blinded her to the severity of Amanda's action. The apology was meaningful, but it couldn't undo the months of tension and mistrust that had damaged our relationship. Michael's father took a different approach, choosing to simply never mention Amanda again, rather than confront the full implications of what she had done. This selective amnesia created its own tensions during family gatherings, where everyone had to carefully navigate around the invisible presence of the family member who could no longer be discussed. The most unexpected consequence of the Amanda crisis was how it affected my relationship with Michael's extended family. Cousins, aunts, and uncles who had initially been skeptical of the fraud allegations eventually came to see me as someone who had protected the family's reputation by exposing Amanda's behavior before it could cause even greater damage. Several family members confided that they had always been uncomfortable with Amanda's tendency to blame others for her problems, but had never felt able to voice their concern. This shift in family perception led to deeper relationships with Michael's relatives and a stronger sense of belonging within his family network. I was no longer seen as the outsider who had married into the family, but as someone who had proven her loyalty and commitment by handling a difficult situation with integrity and grace. The most poignant aftermath of the entire experience has been the occasional updates we receive about Amanda through mutual connections in social media. She moved to Seattle as we had heard, but her pattern of job instability has continued. In the 2 years since her termination from Riverside, she has worked at 4 different companies, never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. Through LinkedIn and other professional networks, I can see that she continues to position herself as a customer experience expert and change management specialist. Her professional profiles emphasize her ability to identify operational inefficiencies and implement systematic improvements in customer satisfaction. The language is carefully crafted to sound positive and achievement-oriented, but to me it reads like a coded admission that she continues to use the same manipulative techniques that she employed against me. I sometimes wonder if Amanda learned anything from her experience at Riverside, whether being exposed and terminated forced her to engage in any self-reflection about her behavior and motivation. But based on her continued pattern of job instability and the carefully constructed narrative she maintains about her professional capabilities, I suspect that she has simply refined her techniques rather than abandoning them. The most unsettling discovery came about 6 months ago when a former colleague from one of Amanda's previous positions reached out to me through LinkedIn. This person had found my profile while researching Amanda for a reference check and wanted to discuss some concerns about inconsistencies in Amanda's work history and performance claims. During our phone conversation, this colleague described a pattern of behavior that was eerily familiar. Amanda had joined their customer service team with impressive credentials and had quickly identified numerous systematic problems with their operations. She had presented detailed analyses showing declining customer satisfaction and had positioned herself as the solution to these issues. But when other employees began investigating Amanda's claims, they discovered that many of the customer complaints she had documented could not be verified through their normal channel. Phone numbers for supposedly dissatisfied customers were disconnected or belonged to people who had never heard of their company. Email addresses for complaint submissions were found to be fake accounts created specifically for the purpose of generating negative feedback. The pattern was so similar to what Amanda had done at Riverside that I felt obligated to share my own experience with this colleague. I provided a detailed account of Amanda's systematic fraud and the techniques she had used to manipulate our data and influence our management team. This information helped the other company conduct their own investigation, which ultimately led to Amanda's termination from that position as well. Learning that Amanda had continued her fraudulent behavior after leaving Riverside confirmed my suspicions that we were dealing with someone whose deception was not situational or opportunistic but pathological and systematic. It also made me realize that exposing her fraud at Riverside had not just protected my career and my company, but had also created a documentation trail that could help other organizations protect themselves from her manipulation. The experience has led me to become something of an informal consultant on workplace fraud and manipulation. HR directors and executives from other companies have reached out to me for advice on identifying and preventing the kind of systematic deception that Amanda practiced so skillfully. These conversations have expanded my professional network and established me as a thought leader in areas of corporate security and employee integrity. I've also been approached by several employment law firms who are interested in using Amanda's case as an example in training seminars about fraud investigation and documentation. The thoroughness of the evidence that David and I compiled has become a model for how companies should approach internal investigations when fraud is suspected. These opportunities have allowed me to transform the most traumatic professional experience of my career into a source of expertise and influence that continues to benefit both my own career advancement and the broader business community. What Amanda intended as my destruction has become the foundation for a level of professional recognition and respect that I might never have achieved otherwise. The psychological impact of surviving Amanda's betrayal has been equally transformative. The experience forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my own naivety and tendency to give people the benefit of the doubt even when evidence suggested caution. I had to learn to trust my instincts more quickly and to act on suspicions rather than hoping that problematic situations would resolve themselves. This transformation has affected every aspect of my professional relationship. I'm still collaborative and supportive with colleagues, but I'm also more observant and analytical about workplace dynamics. I pay attention to inconsistencies in people's stories. I verify claims independently rather than accepting them at face value, and I maintain healthy skepticism about anyone who seems too eager to point out problems without proposing constructive solutions. The change has made me a better manager and leader. I can now identify potential problem employees before they cause significant damage, and I have the skills and confidence to address performance issues directly rather than hoping they will improve on their own. Several of my team members have commented that they feel more secure working under my leadership because they know I will protect them from office politics and manipulation. On a personal level, surviving Amanda's systematic attack has given me a confidence and resilience that extends far beyond my professional life. I know now that I can handle major crises, that I have the analytical skills and emotional strength to fight back when someone tries to destroy what I've built, and that I can emerge from traumatic experiences stronger and wiser than before. This confidence has influenced my approach to everything from financial planning to social relationships. I make decisions more quickly and with greater conviction because I trust my ability to handle whatever consequences follow. I'm more willing to take calculated risks because I know I have the skills to recover from setbacks and the resilience to persist through difficult periods. The marriage counseling that Michael and I pursued in the months following Amanda's termination helped us develop communication patterns and conflict resolution skills that have strengthened our relationship in ways that extend far beyond the immediate crisis. We learned to discuss difficult topics more openly, to support each other through individual challenges, and to present a united front when dealing with external pressures. These skills proved invaluable when we faced other challenges in the years that followed. When Michael's startup faced financial difficulties and potential bankruptcy, we were able to work together to develop contingency plans and emotional support strategies without allowing the stress to damage our relationship. When I was offered a job opportunity in another city that would have required us to relocate, we had the communication tools to discuss the decision thoroughly and reach a conclusion that felt right for both of us. The experience with Amanda also taught us the importance of maintaining some privacy and boundaries even within family relationships. We learned that being open and trusting doesn't mean sharing every detail of our professional and personal lives with extended family members, and that protecting our own interests sometimes requires disappointing people we care about. This lesson has been particularly valuable as we've navigated other family situations where relatives have asked for help, advice, or financial support. We're still generous and supportive family members, but we're also more careful about verifying the situations people describe and more realistic about our ability to solve other people's problems. The most unexpected long-term consequence of the Amanda experience has been how it positioned me to help other people who find themselves facing similar situations. Over the past 2 years, I've been contacted by dozens of people who have discovered manipulation, fraud, or systematic undermining in their own workplaces and are looking for guidance on how to address these challenges. Some of these situations involve family members or close friends who have betrayed trust in professional settings. Others involve colleagues or superiors who are using sophisticated manipulation techniques to advance their own interests at others' expense. In each case, the people reaching out are struggling with the same combination of personal hurt and professional vulnerability that I experienced during Amanda's campaign against. Being able to help these individuals has been deeply meaningful and has given me a sense of purpose that extends beyond my own career advancement. I've developed an informal network of people who have survived workplace betrayal and manipulation, and we share strategies, resources, and emotional support as we continue to rebuild and strengthen our professional lives. This network has also become a source of early warning about problematic individuals who move between companies and continue their manipulative behaviors. When someone reports concerning patterns from a new colleague or employee, we can often provide background information that helps organizations protect themselves before significant damage occurs. The Amanda experience taught me that workplace fraud and manipulation are more common than most people realize, and that the techniques used by sophisticated manipulators are remarkably consistent across different situations. By sharing information and supporting each other, those of us who have survived these experiences can help prevent others from becoming victims. Looking forward, I'm planning to formalize this support network into a consulting practice that helps organizations identify and prevent internal fraud and manipulation. The business would combine the investigative techniques I developed while exposing Amanda's deception with the psychological insights I've gained about why people engage in systematic workplace betrayal. This venture would allow me to build on the expertise and reputation I've developed while creating an additional income stream that could eventually grow into a full-time business. More importantly, it would give me the opportunity to turn the most painful experience of my professional life into a source of protection and support for other people facing similar challenges. The irony is not lost on me that Amanda's attempt to destroy my career may ultimately lead to the creation of a business specifically designed to prevent the kind of damage she tried to inflict. Her betrayal, intended to limit my opportunities and advancement, has instead opened up possibilities that I never would have considered if I hadn't been forced to develop these particular skills and insights. As I write this reflection on the second anniversary of Amanda's termination, I'm struck by how completely the experience has transformed every aspect of my life. The woman who sat in her office 2 years ago, staring at suspicious customer complaint data and wondering if she was being paranoid, bears little resemblance to the person I am today. I'm more confident, more strategic, more resilient, and more aware of both the opportunities and threats that exist in professional environments. I have a deeper understanding of human psychology, a stronger network of professional relationships, and a clearer sense of my own values and priorities. Most importantly, I've learned that surviving betrayal and systematic attack can be transformative in ways that go far beyond simply recovering from the immediate damage. The skills you develop, the insights you gain, and the confidence you build through such experiences can become the foundation for achievements that exceed anything you might have accomplished if the crisis had never occurred. Amanda set out to destroy my career, my reputation, and my personal life. Instead, she gave me the opportunity to discover capabilities I didn't know I possessed, to build relationships based on mutual respect and shared challenges, and to create a professional identity that is stronger and more meaningful than anything I had achieved before she entered my life. I can't say I'm grateful for what Amanda put me through, but I can say with certainty that I'm grateful for who I became as a result of surviving it. The person I am today is someone who can face whatever challenges come next with confidence, and the knowledge that I have the strength to not just survive, but to thrive. And sometimes, that kind of transformation is the most powerful form of justice imaginable. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.